Father, I just want to pray for whatever it is that you have for somebody who maybe it's their first time coming through. Father, for the one that has come continuously over and over and over and over and over again and remains faithful every single week, Lord, that today would be one of those days where our ears would be opened and in tune and intentional and focused, Lord, that we would be able to remain present today. Tonight during the service, my words, Lord, have no strength. They have no power. I could be the best articulate speaker in the world, Lord, but they have no power unless they come from you. So tonight, Lord, I just ask that you would just fill me with your spirit tonight, Lord. Let what you want to be spoken tonight. Lord, I ask for those who had whatever week that some may have had this week, Lord, that today would be a day where you can just take 1 second, an hour and a half, 2 hours, and just breathe for a second. And as I hear people taking breaths, Lord, and taking that breath in, Lord, I just pray for just the ability to breathe, Lord, that whatever heaviness that you came in with, whatever heaviness that this week has put on you, that the relief that you would feel walking out of these doors would be undeniable, and that it would fill you to the rest of, till the next week or Sunday or whenever it is that we see you again. So, Father, tonight, have your way, Lord. Speak through me. In Jesus' name, all God's people said, amen. Say hi to somebody on your way back to your seat. Hug somebody, dap somebody up. Yeah, it's going to be a good time. With that said, though, I want to say hello to our online audience. For those of you guys who texted me, I know we're actually on time, 7:15. Got it nice and started already today. That was like the most bro group ever right there. It's just like, yo, what's up? Man. It's good to see you guys, man. Aw, thanks, bro. Well, well, thanks, man. Thanks. I appreciate you guys. Well, welcome. If this is your first time here, my name is Israel Arianis. I'm one of the leaders here at Reveal and at the Asylum. Now, for the past couple weeks, as you guys kind of saw with the sobriety chips, we've been in a series called Relationship Rehab. Oh, and I just want to say, our side screens and the screens over there, today has been a day. It's been a day with technical difficulties, but I've realized that whenever there's a lot of technical difficulties, that means the enemy doesn't want something to happen. That means the enemy wants to block somebody from hearing something or wants to make us feel some type of way. So we're rolling with one screen today. So it's going to be, I had to just give that as a disclaimer because I keep looking out there and I keep remembering that, oh, yeah, that's not really working. So, but I just want to let you guys know, now if you've missed the past couple of weeks, Pastor Daniel dipped his toe a little bit into what the fifth step looks like of this whole relationship rehab, the process to wholeness. We moved through phase 1 for the first couple of weeks. I think it was about 6 weeks. And just like with the sobriety chips that you guys had seen, we had gone through phase 1. Now, phase 1 took a lot of self-reflection. It took a lot of honesty. It was getting into the nitty-gritty pieces of who we are as human beings, identifying our secret addictions so that when we move into the places that God has called us to, we can move in with freedom. So phase 1, those first 4 steps that we had talked about was to admit that we have a problem. One of the hardest things in rehabilitation circles is to admit that you have a problem. It's one of the hardest steps to come by. And then second was to confess it to somebody. It's one thing to address it to yourself, but when you have to bring somebody into that personal space, it hits a lot different. And then the third step was to cut off that which keeps you from sobriety, that which keeps you from your clarity, that which keeps you from that side and where you actually want to be in the trajectory that you're on. So I want to give a hand for those who actually had continued that sobriety journey. That was, and the point of doing that is to achieve that clarity that we've been talking about. So good job, really good job. And then step 4, a couple weeks ago, we talked about committing to a community with common values. If you wanted to stop smoking, do you think that having 5 of your closest homies who smoke, do you think you're going to be able to overcome that if you spend the most time with them? Probably not. You know what I mean? It's that idea of committing to a community with common values so that you can start to move into that space as well. Now, Pastor Daniel affectionately referred to it as disciple detox. And then we began moving into this new space last week, or 2 weeks ago, of disciple development. Now, once we've begun to deal with our secret addictions and found some clarity and started to walk this thing out, we begin on this journey of developing ourselves into the disciples that we've been called to be and that we've been commissioned to be. Pastor Daniel went on to ask us about 2 weeks ago this riveting and profound question that when you see a yellow light, does a yellow light mean go faster, or does it mean to slow down? And ironically enough, I think we all got debated because that lighthearted question where a lot of you guys, you know what's funny is I noticed the people who said that they slow down were like older, and then all the, and AJ wanted to just speed right through a lot of these things. But now I'll tell you guys, that lighthearted question I think revealed the truth in that a lot of us it revealed the truth in a lot of our lives. That in a lot of situations, we don't want to slow down. Think about it like this. You get into a romantic situation. Your girls or your boys are super, it may go something like this. They're super stoked for you. They're like, man, I'm so happy for you. That's amazing. That's great. But just take it slow. Slow down. Don't rush into it because I don't want to see you get hurt, right? And then boom, it's been a month and you're already planning where your kids are going to college, what kind of dog you're going to get because cats are evil, and you've established a timeline of expectations that are ultimately built on a couple of coffee dates and a foundation that's not going to last. Maybe it sounds like this. Your friend, for those of you who are old enough to drink, your friend tells you to slow down on your alcohol consumption. But you say, mama ain't raised no bite-sized tolerance. And you speed through the next couple of rounds, not remembering the fact that it takes a little bit for that to hit. And now you need a bucket, some Pedialyte, and a ride home because you just didn't slow down. Last one. How about this? You got so heated with someone, some belligerent comments, or maybe they came at you sideways and disrespected you, and you typed out this whole text, this whole long text. And the homie that you were confiding in and you were venting to says, okay, maybe you should just, maybe sleep on it, think about it, come back to it in the morning. And you say, but I already sent it. And your homie is like, awesome, that's great. You sent the text with all of your emotion, all of your unprocessed anger, with every bit of emotion that you felt, and a lot of things that you didn't mean to say. And now what was a salvageable relationship has now been damaged to the point that you're now the bad guy. A big topic of the past couple weeks was to make sure that we slow down, to be able to go through development, to sit in the tension and to endure the shaping process into who we're being developed into. So that's what the phase of disciple development looks like. Because in 2 Peter 1, verses 5 to 7, it says this. Go ahead and throw that up, Amanda. Thank you. So don't lose a minute. And this is the Message version. If you've never read the Message version of the Bible, I know some people have the gripes with it. It helps to kind of bring the Bible to kind of current terminology. It's good. So this is what it says. So don't lose a minute in building on what you've been given, complementing your basic faith with good character, spiritual understanding, alert discipline, passionate patience, reverent wonder, warm friendliness, and generous love, each dimension fitting into and developing the others. With these qualities active and growing in your lives, no grass will grow under your feet, no day will pass without its reward as you mature in your experience with our Master Jesus. Without these qualities, you can't see what's right before you, oblivious that your sinful life has been wiped off the book. Now, I love how it spoke of that in the verse, to build on what you've been given, complementing your faith with good character, understanding, discipline, patience, friendliness, and generous love. And then that all of those things that we continue to cultivate will begin to develop us and work together for our good. So slow down. Go through the process. And as we dive into the practical aspects of step 5 tonight, I want you guys to keep that in mind. We never are done developing in our walks. It's a constant process, and once we fall in love with the development process, just like it says in that verse, will we become oblivious to the fact that our old life has no hold on us anymore. It's wiped from the book. Nobody can hold it against you. Jesus doesn't even hold it against you. So who am I? So that's what I would say. As we choose to go in tonight, dig in, plant your feet, remain steadfast in the tension. But moving in, so last week, as I've stated before, Pastor Daniel gave us step 5 in our 12 steps to wholeness, which was to create closure from past wounds, even using Matthew 5 to further solidify the direction we're going. Because Matthew 5:21, verse 20, or 5 chapter, or verse 21 to 24 in the Message says this. You're familiar with the command to the ancients, do not murder. So it's saying you guys all kind of understand that murder is not a good thing, right? Do not murder. But I'm telling you, sounds like my dad, that was weird. I'm telling you that anyone who is so much as angry with their brother or sister is guilty of murder, carelessly call a brother an idiot, and you just might find yourself hauled into court. Thoughtlessly yell stupid at a sister, and you are on the brink of hellfire. The simple moral fact is that words kill. That's in the Bible, bro. I'm telling you, the Message version brings it kind of down to earth a little bit. 23 to 24 says, this is how I want you to conduct yourselves in these matters. If you enter your place of worship and are about to make an offering, You suddenly remember a grudge a friend has against you, abandon your offering. Leave immediately, go to this friend and make things right. Then and only then come back and work things out with God. Now, last week he didn't quite use that version of the verse, but I found, like I said, the Message version, I couldn't help but use it. But that harmony is a God principle. Harmony among the family with the people that you love, and harmony among your enemies with the people that you don't really like all that much. It's a God principle. And then us, those who call themselves believers or who say that they follow Jesus, are called to exemplify those very principles. And last week, with step 5, there were 5 concepts that went along with creating closure from our past wounds, from offenses or negative experience. To practice forgiveness without expectations. But step 5 had 5 points that went along with that we covered the first 3. But just as a quick reminder, go ahead and throw that up a minute. Step 5, creating closure from past wounds. Creating closure is a Jesus principle. Creating closure is my responsibility. Creating closure is a choice. Creating closure will bring more comfort, and creating closure brings more peace. And now this week, we're diving into the last 2. That by choosing to create your closure from past wounds, it brings more comfort, it brings more peace to our relationships and into our lives. This is going to be a super practical one this week. I'm going to do my best to kind of give you guys the material, so I want you guys to, as much as you can, I would encourage you to kind of follow along and kind of traverse this terrain with me. Now, while I was preparing for tonight, I found an article on wound assessment. And you graduated from nursing school, right, Leah? Maybe. Now, she can fact check me on all this now. So now we, if you get hurt, go to Leah. But I'm just kidding. Or maybe, I don't know if you want to do it. Yes. But I found an article on wound assessment from a clinical perspective. And I was curious to see how it kind of applied to where we're choosing to go with this whole idea of addressing wounds, right? And I was curious what the clinically correct questions were to ask. Now, they seem like common knowledge at first, but I think if we're going to be responsible enough to do our own self-wound assessment, these are 3 questions that you have to ask yourself first. The first question was, what type of wound is it? What type is it? The second question is where is the wound located? And then third, what is the size of the wound? Now, you may be thinking, how does that apply to where we're going? Just stick with me on this. What type of wound is it? Was it an offense? Was it a harsh word? Was it an unmet expectation that you had of somebody? Was it a promise that was never kept? Was it a violation of your safe space? Was it slander to your reputation? What type of wound is it? And then, where is it located? Was it your pride that was hurt? Was it your self-image? Was it your ability to trust people? Was it your perspective on how good a human can really be? Or was it skewed because of the hurt? Where is the hurt and the wound located? And then finally, how big is it? How severe is it? Which leads me to the title of the message today, The Scratch, the Cut, and the Gash. Now, normally, I'm a visual guy, and I'm not going to put gashes and cuts, and even though we got a couple people that would be used to that, I think I would pass out. I can't do blood, bro. But in life, we experience all kinds of different wounds. If you have scratches, you got cuts, and your gashes, we all have experienced them on one level or another in our lives. And just as a visual, I need 3 people. I need Matt. You're ready? Yeah? Yeah, I was going to say, I don't even feel like I got to ask. He's just ready for everything. Joel, are you good to come up? Yeah? Joel? And then, I need someone in the middle of their height. Come on, bring it up here. Bring it up here. Yeah. Is it, no, you're not the short one, bro. It's okay. You just you own it, baby. You own it.
Aaron, your fun size.
And that came from this side, not that side. Normally it comes from that side. It's a little sus. Shoot. Give me more. See, I could, but I got to explain where we're going with this. Who's the same height as me? Marcel? Let's bring it up here, Marcel. Come on. Now, just as a visual.
I'm taller than him, bro.
This is where egos get hurt. I'm not saying you have an ego. I'm just saying, okay, dang it. That works. He got 2 inches on him. Okay. We'll just roll with this. You get it. So, I'm sorry, Marcel. Now it's in my bed. Now it's in my head. Son, bring it on over here, bro. Marcel, I'm going to have you. I'm sorry, bro. Okay, yeah. Okay. Man. Got me sweating up here now, bro. I just caused a wound just now. Now, these are your wounds. Matt is a wound. I'm just kidding. So I'm going to have you hold this. Step up in the light, too. Come on closer, a little bit closer. This is the scratch.
I'm the little baby one, yeah.
He said, I'm the little baby one, yeah. Now, listen. The thing about a scratch is with the scratch, the thing about it is it's a surface wound. It happened on the surface. And the thing about a scratch is it doesn't take very long to heal. It doesn't hurt that much. If anything, it's more irritating than anything. I'm not saying you're irritating. I'm just saying like the scratch is irritating. And it doesn't take, like I said, it doesn't take as long to heal. It doesn't hurt as bad. It's kind of more so on the surface, right? And then you got the cut. Now the cut, it goes deeper than the surface. This is the one that bleeds. This is the one that when you... This is the one that goes a little bit deeper than the surface. This is the one that you tend to think about sometimes when you look at yourself. If somebody made a comment about the way that you look or where you're going in your career or where you want to do or kind of who you are as a person, this one kind of hurts a little bit more. It's the cut. It takes longer to heal. It bleeds a little bit more, and it hurts. Now, this is the gash. And if any of you guys have a gash this big, it's I don't know if Leah can help. It's going to be over. That's the thing. Now again, the gash is a little bit different than the cut or the scratch. The gash, this was the thing that devastated you. This was the absence of a father. This is the mother that never encouraged her son enough, so now her son looks for validation from women. This right here, this is the careless words or the harsh words of a parent or a loved one, like, you're such a failure. You're not going to amount to anything. You're lazy. You're a disappointment. The gash, this is the abuse that was never resolved. This is the rage that you never addressed. This is the gash. It bleeds the most. It's the most messy. It's the most vulnerable. It's the most sensitive. And it takes the longest to heal. And for it to become fully healed, it needs the most care, the most intentionality. And the difference between the scratch, the cut, and the gash is the gash needs to be stitched up. It needs stitching. Now, with each of these things that you guys have here, you and I have a responsibility to address them and bring closure to our wounds. I can't just expect someone else to come along into my life and be like, oh, you know what? This giant gash that you have in you, I'm just going to slap a Band-Aid on it. I'm just going to slap, a couple good morning texts onto it, and you'll be fine. It doesn't work like that. It's still, again, creating closure from past wounds is my responsibility. It's no one else's. And no one can help you close those wounds. Because the thing is some of you may think, okay, well, yeah, you can't, you maybe not be able to close those wounds, but I can have somebody help me through them. Yes, you could hire a therapist. You could hire a counselor. And for those who maybe go to therapy and counseling, I commend you, because that is a very difficult step to take. So I commend you on that. But every day that you go into that office, you still have to choose to want to heal. Nobody is going to be able to do it for you. Give it up for my wounds up here. I'll just take these back from you guys. And that's just a little visual just to kind of the differences between how big they can be, especially, how tall are you, Joel? I always forget. 6'7", man. You just took all the height, huh? That was disrespectful. I just found out I'm 5'9" the other day. I was not happy. So how do we heal? What's the process to addressing the wounds? Because the thing is I could stand up here every day and tell you guys, yeah, you should address your wounds, but if I never give you practicality on how to do it, this is what we're going to be diving into today. So addressing these wounds, or to begin to find closure and healing. And again, if you've been kind of zoned out, maybe fallen asleep a little bit, I need you to lock in, because I'm hoping that after tonight, you can take this process and apply it to your own wounds and begin to kind of find the healing that you may have been looking for. Now, in any movie or TV show, when someone is wounded, stabbed, shot, maybe cut, gets hurt in some freak accident, and they're bleeding all over the place, what's the first thing you hear people say? Say it again? I heard that, pressure. Call 911. Yeah, that's true. Call 911, Jesus. So that's good. Apply pressure. So that brings us to the first point. When you've suffered from a wound, when there's something that's caused you to bleed, the first step is to apply the pressure of prayer. When you've suffered from a wound, especially the ones that kind of throw you off, the ones that kind of catch you off guard, the ones that you wouldn't have expected, the ones that kind of come out of left field, the first thing that we got to do is to stop the bleeding. Because so often we can get caught up and stuck in the shock of it, and we have to apply the pressure of prayer. In Philippians 4, chapter 6-7 of the New King James Version, it says this: "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds through Christ Jesus." Now, there's two things, if you guys are taking notes, I want you to write down, or I want you to kind of remember through that, with that first step. When you apply the pressure of prayer onto that wound to stop the bleeding, there's three things that happens. The first one, applying pressure removes anxiousness from our emotions. It brings peace to your mental. It calms the waters of what ifs and the storms of emotions that you feel when you're wounded. The second thing, applying the pressure of prayer guards my heart and my mind. And then third, the sooner that you apply the pressure, the sooner the bleeding stops. The sooner that you do the thing that you know in your heart and in your mind that you should be doing, the sooner you'll get out of the hole. The sooner that so many times, even in the morning, or times where I'm just feeling some type of way, and I got this my natural inclination is to be really distant and really angry, like a little angry elf. That's my natural inclination. That's kind of just what my natural draw is. So in the mornings, or when I feel like the sooner that I choose to take it to God, the sooner that I choose to dive into my word, the sooner that I choose to, just like Peyton said, listen to a worship song or blast some worship music to pray for me when I can't, the sooner that I start to come back down to who Israel really wants to be. Now, this is important because what's in my heart and on my mind will come out of my mouth, especially when I'm hurting and especially when I'm wounded. If what's in your heart right now is anger, unforgiveness, bitterness, and hurt, with the addition of thoughts in your mental and in your mind that resemble anger, unforgiveness, bitterness, and hurt, guess what you're going to be spewing out on everybody around you? You're going to be spewing out anger, unforgiveness, bitterness, and hurt. Unforgiveness and hurt onto everyone that you come into contact with while that wound remains open and it hasn't been dealt with. So the pressure of prayer is the first step. So the sooner that I apply that pressure, the sooner it'll stop bleeding on everyone else. And how many of you know that no matter how many people you tell about the wound, and no matter how many people you share that wound with, ultimately it won't be healed and won't stop bleeding on other people, making their lives extra messy until you choose to apply the pressure yourself. We got to make the choice. Nobody's going to do it for us. In an INDEPENT culture where we want to be independent, this is the most codependent, independent culture I think that I've ever seen. And I guess that's not that long. I'm only 24. So I guess I haven't seen that much, but my man. Because again, we can talk about it all day long. But until there's intentionality to our healing, it's an endless and fruitless cycle. And misery loves company. But in everything, and I love that that's the promise, but in everything, by prayer and thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God, and the peace of God will guard your hearts and minds through Jesus. We still can't do it without Jesus. He just like we've talked about so many times in here with the church, one of the functions of the church is to be a hospital. So many times, he's the same question he asks us over and over and over again. We bring it to him, and he says, do you want to get well? We bring him something else, do you want to get well? We bring him the same thing over again. He says, do you want to get well? Because we have to choose to take the steps. But the second part of the process, once you've kind of stopped the bleeding and applied the pressure, is to disinfect the wound. Now, this is the hard one. One of the hard ones. I don't think healing is necessarily an easy topic, but you got to choose to disinfect the wound. We have to make the decision to disinfect. And how do we do disinfect? Psalm 139, 23 to 24 says this. Search me, O God, and know my heart, and know my anxious thoughts. Point out anything in me that offends you, and lead me to an everlasting life. Point out anything in me that offends you. See, to subject yourself to being examined or to being known by God is to make the decision to be fully known and fully accountable for your part. See, disinfecting the wound in its simplest form, disinfecting the wound is to remove your responsibility for the part that you played in it. Taking ownership of every small or major part you may have played in it, even if you don't feel responsible for it. You're clearing the way, you're getting the dirt and the grime of what you've said, what your responsibility was in it, so that you know without a shadow of a doubt that you've done everything you can possibly do to try to mend that bridge, to try to bring closure to that wound, and to try to heal from that. Now, I will say, there is a fruit of taking ownership of those and choosing to disinfect this wound, right? There's a byproduct, because every decision that we make has some type of effect, right? It has some kind of consequence or reward for the decisions we make. So you can kind of tell, because again, the fruit of taking ownership and choosing to disinfect that wound is you will become more peaceful. If you say you took responsibility and it just gets you all fired up again, you ever have those? Get you all fired up again. You may not have done it with the right intentions, especially if now when you self-reflect on it, your attitude is more reflective of an aggravated or dismissive mindset towards the other person that was involved. The way that you'll know you've disinfected the wound and taken care of it with prayer the right way so far is you'll finally have a little bit of peace and joy when you see that other person, or you see whoever it was or whatever that may have looked like. Now again, a lot of you guys know kind of the story between my father and I. If you guys don't know, Pastor Daniel is my father. He's, I don't know, he's the bald guy with tattoos and dresses a lot like me. Sorry, Dad. It wasn't until with my dad, because the thing that happens is when you start to disinfect the wound and you start to feel that peace and that joy, and you start to be able to look at that person again, and you start to be able to have a relationship, and not even a relationship romantically, but just being able to be civil with somebody or being able to address them in a way and it not immediately become negative, you begin to pour excuses all over the wound for your offender's benefit. That, just like rubbing alcohol, right? When you have a wound and you put rubbing alcohol on it and you got to disinfect it, what does it do? It stings, right? It doesn't feel good, but you know that it's cleaning it out. So when you begin to be able to make excuses for the other person's benefit, the one who hurt you, the one who didn't deserve your forgiveness, it's a pretty good heart check. Like with my dad, when I sit there and I was sitting there and we was contemplating, and for those of you guys who know the story, the long version, short version is, there was just a big gap and a big divide that was made between me and my father, to the point that I had grown up in the church. He had taken me to church, and there was a point in my life where he had provided for me in all the ways financially. When you hear I provided this house for you. I provided the clothes on your back and the food. He provided. And then he'd take me to church, and then he started investing in more people than he did his own son, and I got to the point where I said, if your God is anything like you, I don't want anything to do with your God. I don't want anything to do with that. And once I got to the point, and we got to hash it out, and we brought closure to it, I was able to say, you know what? He may have messed up in a lot of ways. I may have been like 7 or 8 telling him not. He may have used me as his accountability partner at 7 and 8 when he wanted to go club and go do what he was going to do. But he was just doing the best with what he had. See, because when you can start to when I say pouring excuses for the offender's benefit, when I was able to start saying, you know what? My dad didn't have a Christian father. The only good influence in my father's life was my grandmother, Meme, who told him to go to church on Sundays and beat him over the head with Bible verses every once in a while. That was all he had. And you know what? He made the best with what he had. Maybe it sounds something like this in your own life. For broken relationships, for the guys. Everybody wants a driven woman until you realize that a driven woman doesn't have a lot of time to baby you like your mom does. I'm just saying. That one hurt. I'm sorry. No, but listen, this is the thing, man. Listen, because if you can get to the point where you could say, you know what, I couldn't imagine the pressure she must have been under. I know our relationship must have added unnecessary weight to her already heavy schedule. It hurts that we aren't together, but I hope she can breathe a little bit better. And I'm wishing her the best. If you can say that, or vice versa, you know you're bringing closure to it. When you can start to disinfect the wound to where it doesn't hurt when you touch it, or it's starting to get clean, it looks a little bit different. Maybe it sounds like this. Mama took care of us all on our own. Even though I wish I had more time with her, even though I wish we could have had a better relationship, I know she was doing everything in her power to give us the best life she possibly could. See, now, Jesus gave us the ultimate pardon phrase for the offenders. While he was hanging on the cross with punctured hands, a wounded body, with lacerations and blood pooling after being emotionally, physically, and mentally abused, being taunted and mocked and wrongfully accused, we see in Luke 23, 32 to 35. And this is the example. When people say, hey, are you a Christian? Or they say, hey, are you religious? Sometimes I have to be cautious because some people's experience of what a Christian is contrary to the Jesus that I say that I serve. So I have to be cautious. So this is a perfect example of Jesus' character. He says, and this was during the execution, right before the execution. So verse 32 says, 2 others, both criminals, were taken along with him for execution. When they got to the place called Skull Hill, I didn't even know that was called that until today. They crucified him along with the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. 34 to 35 says, Jesus prayed, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. And as he said that, they're dividing up his clothes. They threw dice for him. And the people, this should give you this kind of an insight on what it looked like. Dividing up his clothes, they threw dice for them. The people stood there staring at Jesus, and the ringleaders made faces taunting. He saved others. Let's see him save himself. Oh, you can't? Poor Jesus. While he's bleeding out. The Messiah of God. Ha! The chosen. Ha! Father, forgive them. But in spite of all of that, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. So who am I to hold unforgiveness back from somebody else? Forgive them, for they know not what they do. And in our own lives, when you've been wounded and taken responsibility for your part, when we choose to disinfect the wound, our hearts resemble that of the heart of Jesus. That simply says to those who scoff at you, mock you, hurt you, and damage you, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Even in the little things. Somebody cuts you off on the freeway. Lord, forgive them, for they know not what they do. The snide not even the snide comment, the joke that just kind of hit a soft spot or a sensitive spot with your homies when you're hanging out and it hit a sensitive spot. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. I've had to use that a couple times today. On myself. So forgive them, for they know not what they do. So how do we heal? The process through healing our wounds so far looks like this. Apply the pressure to stop the bleeding, to stop the anxiousness, and to protect your heart and mind, and do it quickly, because whatever's in your heart, that's not my heart, whatever's in your mind and whatever's in your heart is going to come out of you. Number 2, make a decision to disinfect the wound. Remove your responsibility from it. Own it. Pour excuses all over the wound for the benefit of the offender to keep it from getting worse or turning into something more than it was meant to be. An untreated infection, if left long enough, can result in the loss of a limb, maybe the loss of your right-hand man, and the loss of a clear-headed leader. But the final steps of the healing process, this is number 3. So if you're taking notes, this is number 3. We got to be able to properly stitch up the wound. So after you've applied pressure, you've stopped the bleeding, right? You've disinfected the wound, so now you kind of can start to breathe a little bit better, and it's starting on its way back. Now you got to stitch it up. And again, depending on the severity of the wound, whether a scratch, a cut, or a gash, it requires different treatment, right? If I was to take some stitches, right, and try to sew up Matt, our cut, or our scratch, you look at me like I'm crazy. Go ahead and throw that one up, Amanda. Scratches need Band-Aids. Cuts need bandages. And gashes need stitches. So it's a different, again, when we talk about the size of the wound, how big is it really? Are you dealing with a scratch and you're walking around telling everybody, look at this is crazy, look what they did to me, oh my gosh. And they're like, I can't even, what? What are you talking about? Or is it really as big as it feels? So we got to be able to stitch the wound. The bigger the wound, the more stitches that it's going to need. See, here's the thing. The thing about these different types of wounds is a lot of times, just like we talked about in the beginning, we want to speed through the healing process. Like we've talked about before, we want to speed through recovery, speed through development, right? Listen, again, we have got to begin to stitch our wounds to bring closure to them. And if I have this massive gash that has never been addressed, because for one, let's be honest, the bigger the wound is in my life, it's not pretty. It's kind of gross a lot of the time. It's messy. And a lot of the times applying disinfectant or applying the disinfectant to any of these wounds, it stings. It's going to sting and it's going to be painful. So the bigger the wound that you have, the bigger the hurt, the bigger the letdown, the more it stings when you try to heal it up. But honestly, the bigger the relief that you feel when you choose to apply the pressure, decide to disinfect, and stitch it up. Now, believe me when I say there is bad stitching. You can stitch up your wound with something that we call bitter stitching. If you choose to, your stitching is, when we talk about stitching, right, when you see this big gash, right, and the way that you kind of stitch it up and close it together, right, that's the way that you see it. It's your perspective on it. Every time you come back to it, and you look at this thing that you tried to sew up and this wound that you tried to heal, does it make you bitter? Did you stitch it up with things like, I can't believe my mom did that to me. She sucked. I didn't need her anyway. I didn't deserve that. That's why I don't trust y'all, and you stitch it up. This is why I don't let people close to me. I don't need nobody, and you stitch it up. Screw you, I'll show you. I'll prove you wrong. And you stitch it up. And yeah, it may close the wound for a minute, but your stitching is your perspective on what happened. And every time that you revisit that wound, if you can speak about it from a positive place, or speak about him or her from a positive place, then you know that you've done a solid stitching job. Because the thing is your stability is in your stitching. If you stitched up your wound from a bitter place, no wonder you keep being pulled back to that dark space in your mind. If you're stitching the wound or numbing it with alcohol or long nights or another person after person after person after person, it's not ever going to be fully healed. You won't ever find that lasting contentment and that lasting joy that you've been wanting. You may get it in moments when you can't feel anything, but it won't last. Because our stability is found in our stitching. And you may get weekend spurts of happiness here and there, but it will never be that lasting happiness, because you go back to it. If it gets brought up, if somebody mentions it, it just takes you right back to that place that you felt before. It takes you right back to those emotions, that pain that you never fully dealt with. And the thing is when we have these massive gashes in our lives, right? And these gashes are tied to little scratches. You ever said something to somebody or made a comment and they just completely lost it? And it wasn't even that big a deal. You were like, man, maybe you made a comment about somebody and they blew up. You're like, bro, I didn't realize it was that. It's because that scratch, that little wound was tied to something way bigger that was never dealt with. And it brought him back to that place. In Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, we're going to start closing it out. Summing it all up, friends, I say to you, you'll do best by filling your minds and meditating on things that are true, noble, reputable, authentic, compelling, and gracious. The best, not the worst. Thinking about the best of people, not the worst of people. The beautiful things about people, not the ugly. Things to praise, not things to curse, but put into practice what you've learned from me. what you heard and saw and realized. Do that, and God, who makes everything work together, will work you into his most excellent harmonies. So I'm going to ask real quick, what have you been stitching your wounds with? Is it like toxic cultural norms? I'm going to go to the gym and face my demons. Is it, I'll show you, what have you been stitching up your wounds with? And this is why step 5 is to bring closure to past wounds, because if you never address these hurts or process through them, they will come back at some point. If you don't heal, it will show up in your next relationship. If you never stop the bleeding, you'll affect the people who are on your side and trying to help you because it just hasn't been addressed. If you don't disinfect it by taking your responsibility in the wound, you'll always be plagued with a mindset of entitlement, waiting for an apology or a reconciliation that may never come. You just cross your arms and say, well, I'll wait till they come to me. You're going to be mad until they come to you? They may not even be thinking about it, honestly. Are you going to let your healing and your forward momentum be determined by somebody else? That's where we go back to that idea of healing. And finally, if you don't stitch it up, or it's a bad stitch job, you'll never fully get to that point of closure that you've been trying to obtain. To fully heal and move on to the next stage in your development. Again, to creating closure, this is just kind of a reminder. So if you are taking notes and you want to double check these are the last ones, and then we're going to break off into groups. But again, creating closure from past wounds. Number 1 is apply the pressure of prayer. So when it's bleeding, I got to stop the bleeding. Number 2 is decide to disinfect the wound, and then last, stitch up the wound or fix it. So we're going to turn on in. Can you pull up the next slide for me? We got the questions up there? Boom, there it is. So we're going to turn it on in. We got about 15 minutes. Number 1, what wound? And this is one thing that I hope you guys understand. One thing about me is I'm never trying to talk at you guys. Going through this and putting some of these things together myself, I have to try to figure these things out for myself, and it brought up a lot of baggage that I didn't know I had. So if you guys, I want to reinforce that I'm going through this process with you guys. I'm no farther along. I may have the bald guy barking at me because he lives with me, or I live with him, vice versa. But just got to be honest. But I just want to make sure you guys know that. That's it. I just want to make sure you remember that. So what wound do you need to start the healing process on? And who are you going to tell to hold you accountable to it? Number 2, which one of the 3 steps of creating closure from tonight challenge you the most, and why? And then, have you ever created closure in a bad situation? And if you did, how did it turn out? And if you don't know already, the questions are in the middle of your guys' tables too, underneath the numbers. So turn on in, and then get moving. And go ahead and